Aileen King, I saw your children yesterday at the Okeechobee camp. Why didn't you put them in the nursery?
I don't make enough to pay for it.
How much does it cost to put them in?
85 cents.
85 cents.
That's right.
Aileen, what time did you come out the field this morning?
6 o'clock.
What time would you get home?
About 3:30, 4 o'clock.
6 this morning to 4 o'clock this afternoon.
That's right.
How much did you earn?
$1.
$1?
That's right. $1.
Is that because the beans were of poor quality?
That's right.
Has this happened before?
That's right.
How much will your food cost you today?
About $2.
Aileen, how old are you?
29.
How many children do you have?
14.
How old were you when you first started working in the fields?
8.
You've been working 21 years in the fields?
That's right.
Aileen, do you ever think you'll be able to get out of this kind of work?
No, sir.
I am living at a shelter. Right now, it's really not going good. And I can get my child taken away from me.
You don't even know the type of day I was having today. I've been struggling for 4 months.
Living in today's times is quite hard, and it's not a shame to admit that many of us are struggling. Everything is expensive, life is not going the way we intended for it to go, and most of all, our deepest wish to give our dear mothers the best things in life, well, sadly, that's not going the way we want it either. I seriously don't even understand why life has to be like this. I can only wonder. Our lives being hard starts with not having financial freedom or the ability to afford the kind of life we desire for ourselves and our families, even though we put so much effort to make money. We have to work hard in order to get a decent salary, yet there are people out there who don't even do physical labor and they're rich. Life is just unfair. As we all know, money is the one thing that drives the world. In this world, you cannot meet your basic needs without having money. Neither can you get medical attention without any money or a medical aid that you have to pay for monthly. Money automatically creates a burden of life which we all carry. In order to get a stable income, you have to work. And if you don't have a job, you won't have any income. If you are the breadwinner of the family, I want to take this moment to thank you for your sacrifices to make sure everyone in the house is looked after. At times, it's not easy having to wake up every morning to go work, and it's also not easy having to live paycheck to paycheck. But I want to share sincere appreciation for your ability to care for others as well. Getting back to the case of life being hard for Black people, we have to first understand and go back to the history of colonization. It was colonizers who introduced a global system of working for them through the use of religion. They promoted this whole idea of Blacks being created to work for whites and other non-Black races by continuously quoting the curse of Ham in the Bible, which stated that Canaan, the son of Ham, would be a servant to his brothers. In order to be fully aware of what's going on in this world in this present day, we have to understand why everything in history happened. In the video called A Letter to Black People, we learned about the true intention of the Christian religion, which was a political agenda or a strategy to invade and to build the system of working which eventually became normal for the world. This world is secretly ruled by a wealthy group of white people called the Christian Illuminati. Therefore, the global money system is also controlled by white rulers. Things like inflation, the cost of living, university fees, student loans, gas prices, hospital bills, etc. are all controlled by these white rulers worldwide. We now have to go back to the history of Jim Crow. White people were the only group of people who were allowed to live freely and work positions of authority in USA, while other race groups, specifically Black, had to work lower income jobs. The racial hierarchy of Jim Crow worked as follows. Europeans were considered the most superior race group in America, and then African Americans were positioned as the most inferior group of people, and we faced the most brutal treatment. White people owned businesses and farms, they were allocated top jobs with great salaries, and they often were the leaders. Black people and other races had to work for the whites. What we don't realize about this racial structure is that it still applies to the present day. People of European descent still work the positions of authority. Non-black people are frequently preferred over black people in terms of selecting someone to be a leader or person in charge for a company. Even if the company you are working for is owned by a non-white person, African Americans still remain at the bottom of the racial hierarchy in terms of jobs. It's sad to have to face this discrimination even after the years of oppression are over. What we are facing today is a system that was created to keep black people at the bottom of the racial rankings. The reason why all of this is happening to black people is a mystery. You may have never heard of anyone explaining this mystery. What if I told you that the hardships we face today as black people are actually explained word for word in a specific book? Yes, you heard me correctly. There's a book containing important laws which is called Deuteronomy, and it explains the mystery of black oppression and hardship. This book was written around 1406 BC, which is over 3,400 years ago. If we turn to chapter 28 in the book of Deuteronomy, we have two terms and conditions that were important in the tradition of the Hebrews who were God's chosen people. One term and condition is about being blessed if we remain in God and obey his laws, and the other one is about being cursed if we turn away from God and disobey his laws. But wait, what do we automatically think when we hear the word God? We immediately think church. We think pastors, we think about judgmental Christians, we think of the false Jesus and the traumas we experienced in church. Well, what if I told you that the supernatural God, who is the creator of man and all living things, had nothing to do with the Christian religion or any religion for that fact? Anyways, I'm not talking about that false god of the Christian religion who will send you to hell for not being obedient to what the oppressor is telling you to do. I'm talking about the supernatural God who we as people have never ever been exposed to. This is his name, and he is a spiritual being who we can only experience if we invite him into our lives. Now, I'm going to go straight into discussing the curses mentioned in the book of Deuteronomy. Let's find out the meaning of the word curse first. The Torah defines the word curse as a spiritual or unseen consequence or effect on you that makes you a magnet of destruction, negative events, or hardships wherever you go. These bad events will be attached to you until you die or until you break the curses, and they pass from generation to generation. Curses are something spiritual which we cannot see, touch, or smell. An example of curses is sleep paralysis, car accidents, abuse or toxic relationship, failing at every try to make a living for yourself, miscarriages, and the list goes on. This upcoming section was taken from one of the videos showcased to an audience situated in Africa. Over the course of time, our ancestors have been moving from place to place, causing us as the current generation to be completely unaware of who we are, where we come from, and most importantly, what possessions of ours have we completely lost. Please watch this short clip before we proceed to explaining curses.
All these things come from the Bible, and that the Bible was all written by black men and women. Abraham's father was a Chaldean. Chaldeans were started by Ethiopians. Ethiopians were black men. Tahor, also Abraham's father, would have been a black man, more than likely, or he would have been very dark. Okay, he wouldn't have been the fair-skinned Caucasians that you see in Israel now. He wouldn't have seen the Jews that you see with the tendrils. Those are not the 12 tribes of Israel. Those are not the Shemites. All the ancient ancestors that we get our entire structure from, books, modern mathematics, judicial system, all these things come from the Bible, and that the Bible was all written by black men and women.
Verse 15, but it shall come to pass, if you do not obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you today, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you.
This verse states that these events will happen if we do not listen to what our supernatural God is commanding us to do.
16, cursed shall you be in the city, and cursed shall you be in the country.
Wherever you are, the curse will be attached to you and follow you whether you are in the city or in the countryside.
17, cursed shall be your basket and your kneading bowl.
Your home will not have food available for you. You will have to work in order for your family to be provided for. If you don't work, you won't have any food. There were even some cases where some people went to sleep hungry when they were growing up because they came from homes that were very poor.
18, cursed shall be the fruit of your body, and the produce of your land, the increase of your cattle, and the offspring of your flocks.
The fruit of your body refers to women's wombs and children. As a woman, you will have issues with your womb and you might not be able to conceive as you wish to. You'll have medical conditions like PCOS or uterine leiomyomas, aka fibroids, restricting you. Some women have severe menstrual cramps, and this curse could be the root cause. Your children will also be cursed and have specific difficulties or diseases. This curse also applies to hard labor. Produce of your land refers to your crops. Your crops will not multiply abundantly. The increase of your cattle and the offspring of your flocks refers to your livestock also not multiplying abundantly.
19 Cursed shall you be when you come in, and cursed shall you be when you go out.
The curse will attach itself to you whether you are moving into an area or moving out of an area.
20 The Lord will send on you cursing, confusion, and rebuke in all that you set your hand to do, until you are destroyed and until you perish quickly, because of the wickedness of your doings in which you have forsaken me.
In everything you do, you will remain cursed and things won't come easily to you. In other words, you won't be prosperous. Another interpretation of this is that people will be mean to you and say offensive things to you for no reason. You will never have any certainty on what to do about the harsh situation you are facing. In whatever you do, you will not find help. You will always have someone criticizing you and you will not be appreciated.
Verse 25 The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You shall go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and you shall become troublesome to all the kingdoms of the earth.
The Europeans have been the enemies of Africans for centuries. During colonization, the Africans were defeated by the Europeans, something that is still happening till this day. You shall become troublesome to all the kingdoms of earth refers to you being seen as a problem or threat to all the different race groups of the world. Non-black people will all see you as trouble when you show up in spaces dominated by them. You will not feel welcomed.
Verse 28 The Lord will strike you with madness and blindness and confusion of heart.
In terms of madness, you will be chaotic when trying to fight against your oppression. In terms of blindness, you will keep fighting against your suffering yet never be able to see what the true cause of it is. In terms of confusion, when you see that your attempts to fight against your suffering aren't working, you won't know what to do or say, you'll be powerless.
Verse 29 And you shall grope at noonday, as a blind man gropes in darkness. You shall not prosper in your ways, you shall be only oppressed and plundered continually, and no one shall save you.
This verse refers to modern-day oppression of the black nation. Majority of the black nation is not prosperous. There are even some prosperous black people who had to sign satanic contracts and offer frequent blood sacrifices in order for them to be successful. Part of the curse is that prosperity will not come easily to you. This curse also explains why poverty is attached to the black nation. Throughout history, black people have been fighting against discrimination and racism, yet this is an issue that still affects us to this day. No one has come and rescued us from this hardship, and this verse states that no one will ever do so. People just won't care about you. To be plundered means to have your possessions stolen from you, typically using force and in a time of war or civil disorder. Being plundered continually means that you will keep on being robbed of your precious possessions. I'm not going to speak about how we have all been victims of robberies and house break-ins. I'm going to just leave it like that.
30 You shall betroth a wife, but another man shall lie with her. You shall build a house, but you shall not dwell in it. You shall plant a vineyard, but shall not gather its grapes.
This verse speaks on generally what happens when a foreign army of people invade a location. Throughout history, events like this have been happening not just to God's people, but every nation who got dominated by a foreign army. You shall betroth a wife, but another man shall lie with her. During slavery, there were instances where black men's wives got raped or taken advantage of by their rulers or slave masters, and their husbands had no power to protect them. You shall build a house, but you shall not dwell in it. This is something that has been happening all over the world where there's black men. With the knowledge they had about building, they built many buildings in every country where they were scattered to, but they were not allowed to live in those buildings. Either because it was an area where they weren't allowed to live in due to segregation laws, or because they couldn't afford to be living in those buildings they had built. You shall plant a vineyard, but shall not gather its grapes. This refers to some of the work given to black people. They were workers in the field or the garden, but they couldn't harvest the crops they had planted for them to enjoy.
30 to your sons and your daughters shall be given to another people, and your eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all day long, and there shall be no strength in your hand.
This verse speaks of what happened during the slave trade. People were separated from their families to be slaves in a country they didn't even know. This verse is also an action that was done during slavery. Whenever slave women had children, the slave masters would transfer them to a different plantation and give them to other women. The children were never reunited with their parents. The biological parents of the children all had broken hearts since their descendants were taken away from them.
33 A nation whom you have not known shall eat the fruit of your land and the produce of your labor, and you shall be only oppressed and crushed continually.
The modern oppressors of black people are Caucasians and Arabs, depending on which region they were scattered to. These are foreign races which were not known to the Africans in lands where they dwelled as the only race group. Eat the fruit of your land. Black people lost the land they migrated to, and the wealth that was contained in the natural resources or precious metals of that land was gained by the oppressors. Eat the produce of your labor. Another meaning of this part is that black men built many properties in the areas they were in, but the white men got to enjoy the wealth that came with selling or renting out those properties. In terms of working in the fields or the plantations, black people were the ones who were allocated to plant and to harvest the crops which their slave masters or taskmasters would enjoy. Till this present day, black people are still oppressed and crushed with no power to fight back. No long-term rewards were given to the men or their descendants who did the hard work of mining or building, and the oppressors still continue to be wealthy and well off today.
34 So you shall be driven mad because of the sight which your eyes see.
Having to live this way is horrible, and the only way to forget the pain is to escape it through doing things which will give you instant gratification, because there's nothing else that's pleasurable as that form of escapism is. You will be hooked to escapism like a drug and not be able to stop it.
36 The Lord will bring you and the king whom you set over you to a nation which neither you nor your fathers have known, and there you shall serve other gods, wood and stone.
You will be forced to follow the religion or serve the gods of that nation who is your oppressor. Depending on which nation your oppressors are, you will serve wooden idols if your oppressors are Europeans. These wooden idols refer to the Christian religion. If your oppressors are Arabs, then you will serve stone. This refers to the Kaaba or black rock, which is considered to be holy in the Islamic religion. The stone also refers to the Christian religion, as there are Christianized statues made of stone in church as well. The various different stone gods of Rome and Greece were thrown into the church. Your oppressors will use brutal methods to get you to abandon your own gods and your customs. Yahweh, our supernatural God, will not protect you from their brutal attacks towards you, and neither will the very same gods you abandoned Yahweh for protect you.
37 And you shall become an astonishment, a shock, or surprise, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, where the Lord will drive you.
Everywhere black people are scattered, the nations they are living with will call them offensive names or racial slurs. Depending on which location black people are scattered, the racial slurs towards them vary throughout the world. The part saying you shall be in astonishment refers to you being seen differently by non-black races, and they will discriminate against you or be racist towards you for absolutely no reason.
Verse 41 You shall beget sons and daughters, but they shall not be yours, for they shall go into captivity.
This verse refers to both slavery and prison. In terms of slavery, the slave children were taken away from their parents to go work somewhere else. For they shall go into captivity. The first interpretation for this is what's written in the book of Isaiah on chapter 24 verse 22.
They will be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit, and will be shut up in the prison. After many days they will be punished.
The second interpretation is they will find themselves part of troublesome activities with no escape. One example is being in a gang or being a drug lord. When they try to leave these criminal activities, they'll be in danger of possibly getting killed with no escape. In terms of prison, prisons will be filled with a large number of black individuals. As a parent, your heart will shatter when the child whom you had so much hope for goes into the wrong path and commits offenses which will take him to prison. This also refers to innocent black individuals being targets of the police. A person who is always being watched has no freedom.
But this is a people robbed and plundered. All of them are snared in holes, and they are hidden in prison houses. They are for prey, and no one delivers, for plunder, and no one says, Restore. Who among you will give ear to this? Who will listen and hear for the time to come? Who gave Jacob for plunder, and Israel to the robbers? Was it not the Lord our God Yahweh, he against whom we have sinned? For they would not walk in his ways, nor were they obedient to his law. 43 The alien who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come down lower and lower.
Over here, alien refers to foreigners or anyone who isn't from the black race group. The non-black races will rise and become more prosperous than you, even though you all started with nothing. As they are prospering, you will keep being unsuccessful in every attempt of yours to prosper. You will watch the descendants of the other race groups inherit the prosperity of their parents, and you as the black child will still have nothing, and you will have to work for the other race groups in desperation, even though your parents and their parents each started out with nothing.
40 For he shall lend to you, but you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail.
He shall lend to you, but you shall not lend to him. The non-black race groups living with you in the land where you were born will be so prosperous to the point where they will be the only ones with the power to lend you whatever you desperately need, like money, and you will be so cursed to the point where you can't even lend anything of yours to them because you have nothing. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail. The non-black races will be your bosses or leaders, and you will always be their workers. People in charge of the company you work for will always prefer a person who isn't black to be a leader rather than a black person themselves. This curse is very evident in the workplace. Employers always entrust a non-black person with the position of being a manager or supervisor. No matter how much effort and dedication a black person puts towards their jobs, they are overlooked and rarely ever promoted.
45 Moreover, all these curses shall come upon you and pursue and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord your God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded you.
This verse is the warning which we all needed to hear. However, we didn't really have someone like Moses to point out that this is what we are experiencing currently. Unfortunately, we are suffering for the sins of our ancestors, since they are the ones who didn't obey God and chose to worship other gods. We were all born into idolatry, which is the worship of any spirit that isn't God in heaven. And that is what we all grew up knowing to be the right thing to do. None of all this pain and suffering would have happened if we knew what our ancestors did wrong and apologized for them.
46 And they shall be upon you for a sign and a wonder, and on your descendants forever.
This curse has been upon us as black people for thousands of years. As the descendants of the people who forsook God and broke the covenant which God had formed with our forefathers, the curse still remains on us till this present day. We suffer so much, and we have only wondered why God allows this to happen to us, not knowing that we are under a curse, and the people who are responsible for all these events happening are our ancestors who lived on the earth way before we did. They are the ones who decided to turn their backs on God.
47 Because you did not serve the Lord your God with joy and gladness of heart, for the abundance of everything.
Let's define serve. To serve means to perform duties or services for someone. In other words, to work for someone. Therefore, this verse states that because our ancestors refused to perform duties for Yahuwah, our supernatural God, wholeheartedly, these curses fell upon us. Yahuwah had a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, our ancient forefathers, and all of Jacob's descendants, which is us. He had chosen this bloodline to be his people. All they had to do was preach about Yahuwah to all the Gentile nations, who are those nations that don't know God or the nations who aren't of Hebrew/Jewish descent, and guide them to the right path.
48 Therefore you shall serve your enemies, whom the Lord will send against you, in hunger and thirst and nakedness and in need of everything. And he will put a yoke of iron on your neck until he has destroyed you.
I'm going to repeat this again. The root cause of our suffering today was because our ancestors served false gods and forsook their God Yahuwah. One term and condition of disobeying Yahweh states that a curse will be on us, which makes us dependent on those very same people who cause us pain and treat us badly. This is one of those "as you do to me, it will be done to you" situations. For example, if you once bullied someone in your lifetime, in future someone you love is going to be mean to you and cause you pain much more harshly than you were mean to someone else. Now, because our ancestors who lived before us betrayed their God Yahuwah by bowing down to spirits who are not Yahuwah, and besides physically kneeling down, bowing down also refers to being obedient to false gods or spirits that are not the true God. Therefore, we as their descendants are forced to bow down, or in other words, we are forced to be obedient to our enemies because we need the money they will pay us in order for us to survive. The hint here is that our gods or the spirits that we are being obedient to are actually Yahweh's enemies. Yahweh's chosen people listened to and did tasks for Yahweh's enemies, and now as these chosen people, we have to listen to and do tasks for our enemies so that we can feel what Yahweh felt when we rebelled against him. In chapter 5 verse 19, NLT version, in the book of Jeremiah, another verse explains our situation. It reads,
And when your people ask, Why did the Lord our God do all this to us? You must reply, You rejected him and gave yourselves to foreign gods in your own land, which is Judea. Now you will serve foreigners in a land that is not your own, in other words, an area that is not your ancestral homeland.
At a later stage, I will explain how our ancient ancestors fled from Judea, which is a country that is now known as Palestine. And another interpretation of the land that is not your own is that even if you were born in any African or highly black populated country, that country will belong to those who rule over you, and you as the people born there will not have any ownership of it. Going to the book of Psalms 106 verses 40 to 42, it says,
Therefore the wrath of the Lord was kindled against his people, so that he abhorred his own inheritance. 41 And he gave them into the hand of the Gentiles, and those who hated them ruled over them. 42 Their enemies also oppressed them, and they were brought into subjection under their hand.
In the book of Baruch chapter 4 verses 6 to 7 it says,
You were sold to Gentile nations, but not to be destroyed. Because you made Yahweh angry, he handed you over to your enemies. When you offered sacrifices to demons instead of to Yahweh, you angered the one who made you.
So the explanation is that you will be a needy and desperate nation which will be dependent on your enemies just to survive. It's not a nice thing to have to work for someone who mistreats you and doesn't admire you, but because of our desperation we don't have a choice. Yahweh will not provide for us or save us until we fix our mistakes and the mistakes of our ancestors who lived before us. Physically, the yoke of iron refers to slave chains. But because the curse is a spiritual effect on us, we all have unseen slave chains on us spiritually. We do not have the freedom to do anything we want to do. We can only dedicate most of our time to working because we need the money to pay the bills, buy groceries, and fulfill other necessities. And it's honestly so sad to work hard just to have little to no money to enjoy.
49 The Lord will bring a nation against you from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flies, a nation whose language you will not understand.
When the colonizers came to Africa, they each spoke languages that Africans had never heard before. Africans didn't understand these languages.
50 A nation of fierce countenance, which does not respect the elderly nor show favor to the young.
These verses are referring to Europeans or Arabs depending on which region you were scattered to. The European or Arab nation did not respect black people in the past, and it still doesn't respect black people in this present day. They didn't care whether you are a small child or an elderly person. They treated blacks with disrespect or brutality due to the curse on us that we are not aware of.
51 And they shall eat the increase of your livestock and the produce of your land. Until you are destroyed, they shall not leave you grain or new wine or oil, or the increase of your cattle, or the offspring of your flocks, until they have destroyed you.
They will completely destroy your property. They will take your valuable possessions and won't leave anything behind. They will only leave you alone and move on to the next person after they have taken everything of yours. Produce of your land refers to natural resources, crops, and precious metals.
52 They shall besiege you at all your gates until your high and fortified walls in which you trust come down throughout all your land. And they shall besiege you at all your gates throughout all your land, which the Lord your God has given you.
Your enemies will not stop fighting you until they defeat you and conquer your land. Even after their victory, they'll continue to mistreat you in your own land.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the rest of the explanation, please watch part 2 of this video. The link will be in the description box.